Okay, it's top of the hour. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for joining me in your lunch hour. I'm Rick Escalambre. I'm here to present Tech Tip Thursdays for Delphi and in the good and the bad of Mode 9. We're going to deal with in-use performance monitor performance tracking, give some tips and tricks to help you use that to your advantage. So let's get the show on the road. And for you that are signed up, I'll be sending out a link after this is over, and I load it on my YouTube channel. So if you want to watch this again, you can. Trying to get this little tradition going so that if you want to sign up for the Delphi workshops and you can't make it live or you have to step away, you can go back and look at it. It's a lot of information in an hour. Okay, so Mode 9, in-use performance tracking, is another tool in your toolbox like Mode 6 was and some of the other things we've covered. You don't use it all the time, but it's better to understand it than to not know it at all. That way we're not making excuses for it. Just a reminder, on my YouTube channel, the first one I did back in March was tips for completing drive cycles. Been very helpful. I see a lot of people have been watching it. Go back, get some information out. The last month in April, actually April and May, the last month I did the good and bad of Mode 6. Again, something you don't use all the time, but it's better to understand it, so you use it wisely when you do. And again, it's on my YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch it, share it, and I'm putting them up there for your advantage so that you can find things that you need that are tailored to you. Okay, what are we going to do in this next hour? Real quick, present a driver's seat diagnostic approach to handling incomplete readiness flags and monitor tests. Little chart that I've made up. We're not going to focus solely on that, but I want to show that to you. Explain to you what in-use monitor performance tracking / ratio is. Define the difference between a completion and a condition, especially the word condition. I can't tell you, since I've been doing this, and I seem to be the only one in the country covering this, the word condition has been really messed up a number of ways, and we're going to clear that up today so you understand how important that is and how unimportant that is to things that you're doing, and you use the right terminology. But basically, they're going to show you the frequency with which a readiness flag completes testing. When we move into the new system, OBD on UDS, starting next year, which all 2027 vehicles are going to have, light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, gasoline and diesel, are going to have in-use performance tracking. This foundation will be helpful to that because it's going to change under that system and it's going to be more widespread. And we'll do a webinar on that someday down the road. We're going to take a look at how the most important thing is how you as a technician can use this to your advantage. That's really what this is about. When I presented this to CARB and a couple other people I know related to that, CARB and other EPA, they were surprised that we had found a way to use this for the technician. But if you remember Mode 6, it was the same way. They never thought we'd use it. Used properly, this can help you identify some shortfalls when you're trying to run monitor tests. And lastly, we'll look at 3 case studies that are very important to what we're doing today and show you how this all comes together. Okay, just a reminder, I hear this all the time, I'm not in an emissions state. I don't need to do this. And my simple answer is, if you're repairing a check engine light, you are an emissions tech, because that check engine light is predicting that tailpipe emissions have exceeded 1.5 times the federal standard test procedure. So to do this, you are following the law, you are an emissions tech, and you're going to get that check engine light to go out. Okay, we're going to focus on the non-continuous tests that can only flip to complete once per trip, once the enable criteria is met. As you can see here, the catalyst, the O2, air fuel sensors, heated oxygen sensor, for the oxygen sensor and air fuel sensor, EGR, VVT, EVAP, and secondary air. And these categories are going to change when we move under the new OBD on UDS. So hopefully stay tuned for a workshop on that in the future. Just a reminder that these tests only run complete once per trip, but they might be run multiple times. They might be in an averaging mode. They might be failing and the PCM wants to be sure, so you might see the test run multiple times within the same trip, but it will only report a test result once per trip. Okay, this is a chart that I made up to help technicians, and we're not going to address this whole chart today. Not enough time to do it. We're going to focus on the upper left-hand corner and verify and readiness status. And it says if all or any flags are incomplete, then check. We're going to move to the right-hand column today, and we're going to focus on this little area right here. For all 2008 and newer vehicles with CAN, check Mode 9 in-use monitor performance tracking to see the frequency with which each readiness flag is running its test. We'll explain that as we go through this. The rest of this is a procedural chart that when you're trying to pinpoint issues, follow this chart, whether the mill's on, mill's off. If there's no changes, but mode 6 is changing, then something has been happening. And also remember that it could be an averaging mode and require multiple trips. Again, this could be another workshop in itself. For today, we want to focus on in-use monitor performance tracking. Very simply, this was designed by CARB as a quality control for the OEMs. If you're a smog tech especially, you probably remember the days where some of these vehicles were sitting around like Volvos and some of these other vehicles where there was no fix for running their monitor test. The unfortunate part was the manufacturers were no longer responsible because the vehicles were out of warranty. Now, with this in-use monitor performance tracking, they have the ability to hold the OEM accountable for the life of the vehicle. That means if they're not running their tests frequently enough and they catch it, they can go ahead and issue a recall, they reflash, whatever it might be, but they can do something about it now. So these vehicles aren't sitting wanting to be fixed, but there's no fix for them. And we'll show you that in a couple of case studies and how that's played out. My very first case study played right into that. Okay, for you personally, here's the difference. Before quoting a price to run and set a readiness flag or flags, the technician can quickly review Mode 6 and Global OBD2 to identify the frequency at which a particular readiness flag has run in the past. We never had that before. We'd have to search the internet. We'd have to look up vehicles of interest. We'd have to see who's had problems with these vehicles. Now we have the ability to, when done properly, and there's good and bad of this, I'll explain as we go along, to get an idea what its history might be. This information, when understood, can indicate the driving experience the vehicle has, and that alone might solve your answer right there. By just looking at the person, reading the person, talking to them, you may be able to solve the problem and the frequency with which they're running their tests just by knowing who they are, how they drive their car. Whether it's a stop-start system, where maybe the system's not running all the time. And you can also see if a reflash has been performed. We're going to go through all this. And I'll show you this as we go along. CARB set a minimum frequency of 10% to 50% for these tests to run. I'll explain that in more detail as we go along. But let's start with the meat of this. If you've ever gone into mode 9, you see the word completion. I want to simplify this as much as I can. This is the OEM enable criteria that you've been using since day one of OBD2, and it means that when it completes, it has run long enough, the OEM enable criteria long enough to determine that the system could fail. That's really what it's all about. Nothing more, nothing less. There's a disadvantage to that because it says right here we have 1,675. The question becomes it says 1,675. Does that provide enough information to help the technician? The answer should be no, because there's nothing to compare it to. You don't know how many opportunities it had, how many times it should have run. We're going to explain that in detail. To put it another way, would you bet all your money on the lotto using this number by itself? The answer should be no, because you have no way of knowing what your chance of winning is. So we need to add a second number to the formula. It's back to a fraction. The numerator is the top number. The denominator is the bottom number. We need to have a ratio. So CARB came up with a thing called conditions to give it a weighted average to help you understand how often, how frequently these tests have been running. So let's take a look at that. When you go into mode 9, you're going to see a thing called conditions. I want to clear this up right now, and I've been the only one teaching this since the inception of this. Do not use the word encounters, opportunities. It has nothing to do with that. CARB said we're going to establish some basic driving criteria, and if you drive the car this way, we expect you to run your test 10, 20, 30% of the time, one maybe as high as 50% of the time. It's a drive cycle or a driving pattern that they created to give you that weighted average. We're going to show you as we go through this, if you can run your test without meeting the conditions, you don't care. That is the greatest thing ever. And as we get into this and show this to you, you'll understand what I mean by that. So CARB created these driving conditions that they can use to weigh the number. So if you take a look at this picture right here, we've had 1,675 completions on bank 1. We've had 1,450 CARB trips on bank 1. Now, again, people would say that was opportunities, should have run. No, that's not it. It means we met this criteria I'm going to show you on the next slide 1,450 times. As you can see, we're going to turn this into a ratio later and find out that it's at our advantage. We can run this cat with no problem. But hold on to that thought. So here's what the carb denominator trip looks like, the bottom number. This is a 10-minute propulsion time with one 30-second continuous idle in there, and I'll be breaking this down for you to show you this, with 5 minutes of accumulated driving above 25 miles an hour. If you meet all three of those numbers, then the bottom number, the denominator, goes up one. The term is charging the OEM with a trip. That way they can weight their average against them and possibly penalize them or say that, hey, you're doing a great job. Now, I'll break this down a little bit more, but just keep that in mind. This was also at one time a universal drive cycle that was put out to run misfire, fuel system monitor tests to verify, repair, to remove permanent codes. But for now, we're going to just talk about this pattern and say, first thing I'm going to tell you up front is do not try and drive this pattern. That is not your objective. And I will prove this to you in slides I have coming up. What does that consist of, that bottom number? It affects the CAT, the O2s, the AFS. When you see O2, AFS, EGR, VVT, and they will only increment when you've met the following criteria. You have to run the vehicle for 10 minutes continuously. Drive it. You have to have runtime above 25 miles an hour cumulative, so you don't have to stay above 25 miles an hour. You could be up and down, but once you're above 25 miles an hour, it's collecting the information. You need 5 minutes to get credit for that. One continuous idle during the current trip of 30 seconds. If it doesn't hit 30 seconds, it doesn't run. I'll show you in the next slide a graph of what that looks like. Anytime you're running monitor tests, you always want to check the barrel. You want to make sure the vehicle's at 8,000 feet or below, because if you get 8,001, then that vehicle is going to be suspended when it comes to running monitor tests because the altitude will make the air too unstable and they're not going to run the test. Ambient air temperature has to be greater than 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it's a hybrid vehicle or stop-start vehicle, it's got a cumulative fueled engine operation time greater than 10 seconds. So let's take a look at that on this slide. Here's a graph from Snap-on Scanner on a GM. GM just happens to show this to you. That's why I'm showing you this. You don't go looking for this in the information. I want you educated on this, but once you see this today, just block this out of your mind and just say, I'm not worrying about the bottom number unless it's really high and the top number is really low. Then I'm concerned, and I'll show you examples of that. Here's one where the vehicle was at 28 seconds. There was no longer an idle, so the answer is no. We didn't meet the criteria. Over here, though, in that 10 minutes, we were able to meet the criteria and get a 30-second idle period. When we were driving the car, we were accumulating time above 25 miles an hour. When we dropped below 25 miles an hour, the time froze. When we went above 25 miles an hour, it started accumulating again. Once we get above 5 minutes, above 25 miles an hour within that 10 minutes, that is considered part of a carb trip. So let me do this one. I'm going to speed this one up for the sake of time because we have a lot to cover. This is on my YouTube channel. You can see it there. I'm going to drag through this. So as I drag through this, you can see the blue right now is propulsion time. That vehicle's been running for 50 seconds on. The red is showing you that you are above 25 miles an hour. Now watch what happens to the red now. It's going to stop because we dropped below 25 miles an hour. But we're moving because the counter on top for propulsion time is still working. So all of a sudden you're going to see a little animation where the time's going to take a jump. I'm doing that for the speed, just to make it easier to watch this. Otherwise, this would be a full 10 minutes. We don't have time for that. Now notice, minute and a half, 2.5 minutes. We jumped up to 4 minutes. Now we're into an idle period. We've come to a stop, and look at the green. You see the idle. Going, and all of a sudden we hit 30 and it says yes. So we have one of the requirements met. Now I'm going to speed this up again. I'm going to drag this along. And if you notice, watch the red. We're going to take a little jump here, a little video animation, and all of a sudden we're going to hit 5 minutes. Once we hit 5 minutes, it says yes. The only thing we're lacking to complete that carb trip up the bottom number, and I'm going to repeat this, we don't drive this pattern, but this is how they charge the OEMs with the trip. Look at the blue now. We got to get 10 minutes. If we get to the 10 minutes with the other two being yes, then we have a complete carb trip. So here we go. And all of a sudden, we now have a complete carb trip. The bottom number, the denominator, would go up one. That gives us our weighted average. So this is a look at the actual carb trip. Keep blocking it out of your mind. Don't drive it, but understand it. Okay, now there are exceptions to the rule for that bottom number. If you have secondary air, that number will always be lower. the bottom number will always be lower because it's only charged to trip by carb if it's had a 10-second on command. Think of this. That works first thing in the morning. You might start your car up 15 times during the day, but it doesn't meet the cold start criteria. So the secondary air, the bottom number, will be lower than you would expect from the other ones. And I'll show you examples as we go through it. Look at evap. First thing in the morning, IAT, ECT within 10 degrees of each other between 40 and 95. Start it up 10 more times in a day, it's nowhere near that window. So the carb will only charge them with one trip first thing in the morning. The rest of the time, they're not charged with the trip. So the number will on the bottom will always be lower. And then the one we run into the last 4 years has been the Honda Acura iVTECs without EGR. They have a dual stage VTEC system. That the first one, mid-range, is somewhere around in the 4,000 to 4,500 RPM range. Number of drivers will reach that. Number of them won't. It's the full range has got to go above 6,300 RPM being commanded on to complete the carb trip, to be charged with a trip. So I'll show you this on the next slide, what that would look like if you ran into one of these vehicles, and I'll show you the fix for that. So here we are. You look at all your numbers. Everything's looking pretty good here. O2 is running about 90% completion ratio. You know your chances are good. But look at the EGR. It only has 1 on the bottom compared to 501. That's because the EGR/VVT, the dual stage, is not being met. So they're not charging them with a trip. And you'll see this a number of times on those where they just aren't driven hard enough. Think about your average Civic driver, on a Civic. They might get up 4,000 RPM, but to get up here, you really got to be gunning. So maybe it's the young driver, the hot rod driver that's meeting this, and you'll see the number being higher. So if you run into this problem, here's a fix that a tech down in Monterey, California put together. He and I helped him with this stuff because he was running into this problem, and he eventually put the information together and submitted to Honda to say, hey, this is what needs to be done. And then they went and refined it, and this explains it. So if you run into those Hondas with iVTEC and you can't get the EGR VVT to go, this is the things you want to follow and procedures you want to follow. I've had him driving down the freeway calling me at 80 miles an hour saying, hey, Rick, I can't get this thing to go. It doesn't have paddle shifters. What I find a lot of these, we just started out in the lower gear and gun it. 3 to 5 seconds, it's complete. Move on. It's increment it. You're ready to go. So this is one that's not normal, but it is allowed within the carb regulations. Now, once we have the condition and we have the completions, we have a fraction. Now we can establish a ratio. So here we are. It's telling us on this car, this cat runs at basically, I call it 116% ratio. In other words, you have a 116% chance of completing this catalyst monitor on this vehicle, flipping the flag to complete. If you put that in money sense, I'd be willing to bet there's a number of you that say, hey, I put my money on that, and I bet on that because I got a 100% chance of winning. That's the way you want to think about it. Put it in money and say, hey, how am I going to benefit this money-wise? Well, this is money in your pocket because if it needs to be run, you know you can confidently run it as long as you're following the enable criteria. Now, another one you see, VVT EGR, I see these all the time. Not all of them, but many of them in the 200% range. Easy to run. You won't see the EGR as many. In this case, this is VVT. Runs almost every time. Cold start up on many of them. Not all of them are that easy, but you can see to set the EGR VVT should not be a problem. This is giving you confidence when you're quoting the job that you can run those monitor tests. And here's evap. Now notice the other ones were 1450. Notice evap on the same car, 550. Now you know those conditions are because you had one cold start up in the morning possibly, but you didn't have any more the rest of the day. So carb did not charge them with a trip and increment the bottom number. So that's how you use it. And saying it's a 31% chance on this one. And that's not uncommon for evap because of the variables. And this was an evap workshop. I'd explain that to you in more detail, but that's not uncommon to see that ratio like that with evap. Because the way I explain evap is it starts, but many times it doesn't finish because it's a key off system and it gets interrupted. Okay. Now, here are the ratios that carb requires the manufacturers to meet. And you can see it's pretty generous. You don't want these numbers because if you're trying to quote running the monitor test and you see these ratios, wow, that's not a good option for you as far as confidence and saying that's easily done. All they're saying is we're going to monitor you, and if you can meet these basic percentages, we're happy. We're not going to call you in. We're not going to ask you to do a recall. And you can see it varies from 25% basically to 50% for purge and 40,000 of inch leak. And why is that important? Because you can see those parts of the evap test run, but right above it, the 20,000 of an inch is only 25%. Because when you turn the car off and it has to go into the key off system, too many things can interrupt it. Somebody may start the car up within a minute or two. That ends everything you've just done. So it makes it a little harder to get your completion. I'll show you on a Toyota a very high ratio because they're so good at running their pump systems. They're not the only one. Okay, so this is what they hold them to. Now, if you go into mode 9 and you look at in-use performance tracking and you see this kind of ratio, you need to have a little red flag here. I would say for your mind right now, this is not what I call a healthy monitor test. You don't know the history of the vehicle, but it is telling you it's had 1,464 carb trips, those 3 steps we did, and we've only run it 521 times. Now, for carb, that's a good ratio. They're not going to bother with that. But I'll show you later on in some of the Nissans, when you see this kind of ratio, it's not that it's that hard. You have to figure out what test is blocking you. And we'll look at that in a case study. So this would be a little bit of a red flag if I was going to quote the job and say, hey, I can confidently get this done. If I don't know this vehicle, I've got a little red flag. So think about it that way. You're using this to get a baseline of how good you can do at running the monitor tests based on the vehicle's history. Okay, one thing you will not see in the in-use monitor performance tracking is the O2 heater. That is not reported in that under that because of the fact it's a performance issue. It either works or it doesn't work. It's not measured for emissions, so they don't include it in the in-use performance tracking. We get into the new system, it's going to be a little different under OBD on UDS, but for now, for you working on these systems, we know it's there. We know there's monitor tests for it, but it will not report the in-use performance tracking. It doesn't carry any weight in it. It's not seen as a critical emission threshold device. Okay, now here's your first look at a vehicle. This happens to be a Subaru. You notice the monitoring conditions. Those are the carb trips, 346, 346, 346, all the way down the line. This is also not common to see them all the same, but once in a while you'll see them. It's just letting you know nothing has interrupted any of those carb trips on any of them. And I'll show you one later where there is one. So this here, 346 all the way down the line, means we've done the 30-second idle, we've done 10 minutes of driving, and we've been above 25 miles an hour. And I'll show you this car later on and how this all came about. So this is how we focus our eyes. We can also see how many ignition starts we've had. We'll look at this 182 a little bit later and talk about that when we talk about understanding these numbers better. Here's a Toyota Sienna. You can see on this one, we started the vehicle. Here are all the numbers. We drove the vehicle. All of a sudden, each one of these incremented except evap because every one of these ran during the last trip. We completed all these tests. Both numbers incremented, which means we met the carb criteria and we met the OEM criteria. Okay? It just means you ran it long enough to meet the carb, but we don't need to do that. And again, I'll show that coming up. Evap didn't run because this vehicle wasn't shut off and sat long enough, but I'll show you what happens to that. Now, this is one I show because I don't want you to fret over it. I showed you that Subaru earlier where they were all the same. This one says 1464 in the white, 1464 for the cat, and 1459 in the O2. You don't know the vehicle's history. You haven't seen it all the time. Don't fret over this. There could have been a time when there was a pending DTC or DTC for that O2, and because of it, it suspended the test and didn't suspend the test. It suspended charging for a carb trip, and that may be why it's a different number. So when you see something like that, don't nitpick at numbers and say, oh, they should all be the same. They're within reason. Yes, the O2 should be within a similar range of the converter, but there could have been something in the vehicle history that interrupted it. Okay, now here's that Sienna van that ran after sitting for a long time. We let it sit, and notice what happened on the next key startup. It said, went from 1065 completions to 1066. But notice the conditions didn't change because if you think about it, Toyota runs them with the key off. So why would we charge them for a key off 20,000 an inch? We may have charged them from running the 40, the purge and all that, but we're not charging them for the small leak detection. So you can see here that it incremented. So while that vehicle was off, it did run. So it is possible to increment the top one and not the bottom one. And to be honest with you, we want the top one to increment without incrementing the bottom one. That's money in our pocket. And I'll show you on some driving examples here coming up how that works to your advantage. You don't need to spend a lot of time in this, but you need a general understanding. And that's why you're here today. Now here's one just pulled up to show you that. Look at the percentage here. You're over 125%, somewhere around there, 130%. That's money in your pocket. You know that's an easy test to run. Look at the EGR monitor on this one. This is 250% or 230%. That's money in your pocket. That's letting you know up front the history of this vehicle is those tests are easy to run. And again, we'll look at some that aren't. Okay, here's one I captured from a 2023 Subaru. And this is why I emphasize to you, you're the first ones, other than the morning group, that saw this, to see this, because I've been trying to find ways to show you this so you learn to block out the noise on this stuff. You don't call them encounters. You don't call them opportunities. What we did here in the Subaru, I started up. I drove it for 7 minutes and 30 seconds, give or take a few. In that 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I was able to complete the catalyst, the oxygen sensor, the O2 heater, and the EGR BVT. Hey, I'm going to verify my repair. I'm not going to go out and spend 10 minutes of driving and say, I got to run 10 minutes to increment the bottom number. What this is telling you is this vehicle is easy to run its monitor test. If you can get this done in 5 minutes, all the power to you. We did this one in 7 minutes. All the power. Go back to the shop. You're done. Give the car back to the customer. Whatever you're going to do, get it done. But we didn't get charged a carb trip on this one. We did have an idle period. We were above 25 miles an hour for more than 5 minutes, but we didn't run the vehicle for 10 minutes. No big deal. Keep repeating that to you. The bottom number is just to give you an average, a ratio to say, what are my chances? Do not drive the bottom number. Cut it short if you can. And I'll show you another example of that coming up. I want to run the cat on this car. Well, when I run the cat, let me pause it for a second. The VVT kicks off in a matter of a minute or two. 3 minutes in this case. The oxygen sensor heat runs almost immediately at startup. But I want to run the cat. I need to run the cat. If you know what PID 41 is, that's this key cycle. Everything else is complete, but I want to run the cat this time because I need it to set. I want it to verify a repair. So watch how this goes. There's a number right here. 531 is going to switch to 532 when we get to the white. But notice that the bottom number, the denominator, the carb trip, never is going to change. So let it run, get ready right about here, and you're going to see a change right when we get to the white. So we just completed the cat, and when I finish this up, look at how long we've driven this car. It took us 7 minutes and 51 seconds to do what we just did. I'm not going to keep driving for 10 minutes to complete the carb trip. I don't want you to do that. You don't need to do that. The quicker you can accomplish this, the better off you are. And it's telling you that these tests are easy to run. Keep thinking it that way. Okay. Now this one here is the, let me go back a second. This is the 2022 Honda that was charged a carb trip, and I'll show you why. But we didn't run all the monitor tests. So look at these here, 2713, 2713, and watch the VVT right here as we go through this video. Watch this one right about here. Coming up shortly. The VVT just ran, and we're going to run this thing for well over 10 minutes. But notice, watch what happens here at 10 minutes. Keep watching. At 10 minutes, you're going to see this number increase. It means we did the idle period, we did the cruise, and we did the 10 minutes. So we're going to charge them with a trip. Okay, but watch this when I stop it. Okay, whoops, sorry about that. When I stop it, sorry, when I try and speed these up for you, let me get back to that one. There we go. Let me get this one going again. I want to drag this through and show you. Right there, we charged them with trip, but I haven't done the right kind of driving to complete the O2 and the cat. So in this 10 minutes, all I accomplished was VVT and O2 heater. But remember, O2 heater is not on this list. If you know Hondas, they run almost immediately as soon as the key is turned on and run for up to 30 seconds. They're done. But the VVT ran. I got charged with the trip. VVT went up, but CAT and O2 didn't change because I didn't drive it correctly, even though I drove it long enough. So CARB charged me with a trip. So again, you got to read into the numbers. And we get done with this webinar, you're going to understand this even better. Go back and watch it when you're done. Okay. Now here's a Sienna that I was not charged a trip. It was a hot restart. I took the vehicle out. I drove it. And when I got done, in 6 minutes, I was able to complete the CAT, the O2, the O2 heater, and the EGR in 6 minutes. Done. No carb trip charged. There was a couple idle periods I met. I was well above 25 miles an hour for the time period, but I didn't run it for 10 minutes. Do not stay on the road to run it for 10 minutes. If you can run that top number, increase it without changing the bottom number, that's money in your pocket. Just keep it that way. Okay, now here's the same vehicle on a cold startup. Now notice, over here, we're going to run this thing for over 18 minutes to get it out to the freeway to do everything we want. So this vehicle is going to get charged with a carb trip. We did have enough idle time in here. I timed it out. This was well over 30 seconds. We were above 25 miles an hour long enough, and we ran 18 minutes. So the bottom number will go up, and all the monitor tests, all the numerators will have incremented. Unfortunately, the software, when I was doing this, didn't have the ability to show me mode 9, but I do know that it ran, and I just want to show you that depending on startup temperatures, it affects how they run too. Okay, now here's one that I want you to really think about. This vehicle's got 14K on it. It says, what can we learn? If you see anything with this kind of number on it, you look at the miles, there's a few things that need to enter your mind. One is, has the vehicle been reflashed? If the vehicle has been reflashed and this information is stored in the part of the PCM where it was reflashed, then you got to say, okay, the reflash overrode it. But I'm going to show you a case study where it doesn't always overwrite this information. 2, before 2019, so 2018 and older, the OEMs could store this in what we call volatile RAM, which means if you cleared the memory, you would clear this information. GM was famous for this in the teens. I call it the teens, the 10s to the 17, 18. If you cleared the memory, you could clear this. Not a good idea. 2019 and newer, it was required for them to keep this in non-volatile RAM, so that if you cleared the memory, you couldn't clear these numbers. So you could see the history of the vehicle. Okay? And the other thing could be, there were some of them, if you lost the battery went low enough, just like a memory clear, you would drop to 0. So this is a little bit of a red flag you want to pay attention to, and I'm going to show this to you a little later, and how you can build off of this if they don't wipe it out when they reflash the vehicle. A little chart here that if you're ever wondering why readiness flags don't flip, the catalyst needs a PO420, possibly a PO430, PO133 for front O2, bank 1, bank 2. These are the codes that make the flag flip to complete, and these could be your blockers why the test isn't running. Now, this is also available on diesels. So if you go look in here, oh, the CAT doesn't run. Yes, it does. It runs at a 50% chance of running it. It's 253 over 100. That's double and half. Now, notice this on the NOx catalyst, which a lot of people are having battles with on this. This is a difficult one, just like the O2 sensors on these. 374 out of 1458. That's letting you know this is not an easy one to run. And I think we all know that. You see exhaust gas sensor completions. There's your sensors. Look at the completion ratios. So this is letting you know that you're in for a battle. And if you're dealing with diesels at all, you know about this. If you're doing smogs in California, you know about this too. Okay, they also have codes relating to flipping the flags. If you ever look at a DTC and it says once per trip, that is the DTC that has to run to make the monitor flip to complete. You might run a whole bunch of tests, but it won't flip to complete because you haven't run this specific test. This is what I call the blocker sometimes. We'll show you examples of that a little later. Okay, here's one we can learn something. This vehicle looks pretty healthy. 782 on the conditions. 782, 782, 782. CAT looks good. O2 looks good. Rear O2 is a little lower, but it looks good. It also shows the theory that the O2 does not always have to complete for the CAT to complete, and I'll show you this coming up. But this is what I call a healthy vehicle. This should be a very easy vehicle to run. Now, this is the Subaru I was telling you about earlier. I showed you the 346, 346, all the way down the list. Now, this is where I want to read into things. Everything looks easy to run. Look at the O2s down here, 523 over 346. I'm going to bet my money on this. Look at the O2, 429 over 346. But look at the cats, 182 out of 346, which basically I'm a little over half. So I got about maybe a 60% chance of running this, but I'm not totally confident in it. This is a 2016 Subaru with only 30K on it. So now start imagining in your mind how that vehicle's being driven if it's a 2016 with only 30K on it. I picked this vehicle up from a friend. She was having a problem with their mirror radio system, and I was going to fix it for her. I drove it across town. Driving across town, I ran everything but the cat. Right there, if you know Subaru, a lot of these needed a 15.5 mile an hour cruise. So if you were quoting this job, you'd look at this and say, oh, wait a second. How do you drive this car? It's only got 30K on its 2016. Does she or he do a lot of around town driving? Oh, I can help them. I can get this up on the freeway and get this cat monitor to run. So I see a number like that. I'm not panicking because I know the vehicle. I know how it sets its cat monitor, and I know it just needs to get up on the freeway. But it is a reminder that you need to look at more than just the numbers and think about who brought you the car and how they might drive. And I'll show you another example of that on my own car coming up. So this is not, it's a warning, but you need to read into it and say, hey, how's this car being driven? Who's driving it? And are there any other problems with it? Okay. And in this case, there was none. It just needed to go on the freeway. Okay. So here we are. We've got a vehicle that says, what can we learn from these numbers? Well, if you take a look at this one, this is a hybrid vehicle, 71K on it. So you can tell there was a lot of electric propulsion on this thing and less gasoline. So your numbers on a hybrid may look a lot different. Now you can see why they give them such low ratios. They just want to know that they are running them periodically at 30%, 20%. That's all they need. Okay. So beware of that when you're looking at hybrids, and you got an idea. Now let's kind of summarize this a little bit. One or more monitor tests are required to flip a readiness flag, and this is going to be important. If I said you one or more monitor tests right now, you might be a little confused. If I said you one or more DTC tests are required to flip a flag, that's what we're going to be getting into under the new system. We're going to tie everything to a DTC, and every DTC is going to have an in-use performance tracking ratio, so you can look at the specific DTC number and see that that was your blocker. In-use performance tracking represents a group of monitor tests required to flip the flag. Maybe when we do OBD on UDS, I'll give you a clearer picture of that. Scan through mode 6, looking for potential blockers. We kind of talked about that in the last class. We're going to talk about it a little bit on a Nissan coming up. Carb trip is used. Remember this, it's just used to give you an average. One number by itself doesn't tell you your chances. Two numbers together in a fraction gives you a percentage that might give you an idea what your chances are of being successful. And the one in the blue is really important. If you learn anything today, don't drive the vehicle to complete a carb trip. Now, I did tell you that carb trip was also created to clear permanent DTCs related to misfire, fuel system, open circuits, shorted circuits, DTCs. That's when we use the trip the way it was designed. Just start it up, drive it, idle 30 seconds, drive it for 5 minutes, and drive it for 10 minutes. That should clear some of the permanent DTCs. And then the last ones we talked about was a special criteria that could make them keep the lower than the others because they're not being charged with a trip because of the type of conditions they have. Okay. When I look at this vehicle, you're getting your first vehicle here. You come up to it, and there's a question mark. And what I'd say to you, ask yourself, is this what I call a healthy vehicle? CAT looks good. O2s are very suspect that they're very low. EGR, VVT look great. And secondary O2s look great. So our hang-up seems to be the front one. So if I can't get this Kia/Hyundai along the same lines in this vintage, I've got to focus on my O2s here. It's either driving condition, which typically with Hyundais and Kias they are, or I need to make sure there aren't TSBs for this and find out what else there could be in the enable criteria that I'm missing. But it also shows you, and I want to point this out for you, some of you have not been with me before. The question usually comes up here is, why is the CAT complete and the O2s aren't? There's what they call a parallel monitor, and that's on my YouTube channel, shows you what a parallel monitor is. And certain tests are required to run the CAT for the O2. And then if the CAT criteria comes up, it'll sidestep the O2 to finish it later and test the CAT and come back. So you can see in this case, we do enough of the O2 test to test the CAT, but we never finish off that, maybe that PO133 DTC or that PO1353, or maybe there's a PO13B in the back for the rear O2 that's hanging you up. So this is a red flag that you want to be careful of if you're going to quote this. And if you do Hyundais and Kias, you want to be careful when you're quoting these because these can be a real time consumer. Okay, how do we do this? I'm going to drag through these for the sake of time. Here's Snap-on. Very simply, when you go into your Snap-ons, they're pretty standard. You go into your global side, go down to mode 9, in-use performance tracking, and lo and behold, there are your numbers. Okay, you'll have a couple, 2, 3 pages of this depending on the vehicle. The Innova does a really nice job. These have become very popular tablets. They have 2 ways to get there. One, you can go through testing modes, or you can do vehicle info. And since this was created, and I've helped them revise this, they now add percentages to this. So watch when I come down here. When I get down to the numbers, you notice there's no ratio. Well, their new scan tool software now have ratios in there. So if I look at EGR 5038 over 2928, the third line will be a ratio, and I'll show you that on the Autel coming up. Autel has done that great since the beginning. You look real quick, it says, here's my ratio, and we're going to apply that to a case study coming up. And the last one on Autel, since they don't use modes, you need to go to vehicle information. This is also my YouTube channel. And I'm going to drag through this just for the sake of time. You go into enhanced, right there. You're going to go into enhanced, in-use performance tracking. And I'm going to stop it right about, let me pull it down a little bit, see if something catches your eye right here. This is my own personal Honda Accord 2007, 2.4 liter. Look at the ratio. It's right there telling me that I got a 27% chance of running this CAT. If you're familiar with Hondas, you're wondering, whoa, what's going on with that? Well, I want you to think about this. If you were questioning me, you'd say, hey, Mr. Rick, you're pretty old. Yeah, I'm 75. How do you drive this car? It's my third car. I use it to drive my grandkids to school and around town. You say, oh, okay, then it's just a driving issue here. It's not a CAT issue. This vehicle's only driven around town. If you know Hondas, you know where that CAT's being run. This particular model with the reflash has got to be at 60, 65 miles an hour to run the CAT. There's nothing wrong with the vehicle. So when you're looking at ratios, read into it. Look at who's driving the car. Look at the mileage on it. Look at TSBs. Well, again, we're going to apply this coming up shortly. Next slide, we're going to start getting into case studies. But I love what Autel has done. I've gotten Innova to put the ratios in there. Another tool I use, SilverScan, uses the ratios. It's a quick thing. It's right there. You got documentation, and it's showing you your chances are 27%. But this is not something I want to freak out over because I want to know about who's driving the car. Okay, so get into case studies. This was my very first case study when it came to Mode 9. Former student of mine has a shop down in Redwood City, California, 45, 50 miles from my house. Calls me periodically on this stuff. It says, hey, Rick, I got a 2013 Maserati Turismo with only 30K on it. I'm preparing it for smog for the dealer, and the secondary air is incomplete. And I hadn't seen this yet. And I said, well, Vic, do me a favor. Take your phone, take a picture of Mode 9 on the in-use performance tracking for the secondary air. Well, no quicker had he sent it to me. I looked at this and I said, Vic, stop right there. You got a 0% chance right now of completing that. There's something blocking it. Are there any TSBs? No. Have you talked to the dealer? Yes. They don't know what to do. I said, okay, have you been driving it? See, I drive it from Redwood City Pacific about 35 miles each way. It's still not running. So sometimes you got to go in your brain and pull something out from memory. And I thought, where's this car produced? This car is produced in Europe. I remember we had a Cadillac Catera that had a weird pattern. And I said, hey, here's the pattern for the Cadillac Catera. That 1 to 2 right there required a 17-minute, listen carefully, a 17-minute idle in drive after startup to run the secondary air, the O2 heater, and part of evap. I said, do me a favor, Vic, take it home tomorrow, start it up, let it idle for 17 minutes. We'd only had a couple experiences with it. This was actually my first experience with this. I said, try this. So he calls me up the next day and says, you were wrong. I said, okay, well, we tried. He says, it went in 10 minutes. I said, you mean you complete in 10 minutes? He says, yes. So to make a long story short, sometimes you pull a rabbit out of the hat, look at something that's odd, and this is really odd, and then all of a sudden you have this condition. That vehicle now went back to the dealer to be sold because it had been smogged. But notice what I put in there. Problem solved temporarily. Because if that thing loses its battery, the memory is cleared, and they don't know about that procedure on this particular car, it's not going to work. It's not going to complete again. We've used it on Bentley. We used it on a Bentley and it did work. We tried on a Cadillac, it didn't work. We tried on some more Maseratis, it didn't work. So here's the long and short of it. First case, I call up Mike McCarthy at CARB, who wrote the regulations, and Mike, we got this vehicle, da-da-da-da-da-da. What do you think? He says, well, let me ask my guys to open a case on it. He says, but it's a low volume vehicle. I don't know what we're going to find. Well, guess what came out within a year and a half after we reported this? There's the fix for the secondary air. So if you want to see how in-use performance tracking was designed to be used, this is the end result. How we made it work was to look at this and say, we got a problem. Don't spin your wheels on this. Let's see what else we can figure out. We found a quick fix for two vehicles on this, of the ones we checked it. Reported to CARB after it ran. They did enough research to find a fix for it. So that's how this in-use performance tracking is supposed to work. And I'll show you another case study at the end to finish this up that's really prevalent out there and you need to be very aware of because they're really common vehicles. The problem with this vehicle is try and find a Maserati dealer in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, to take this vehicle to get it reprogrammed. That's the hardest part they have right now. And some of the people in the aftermarket aren't reprogramming these. So the whole process worked. The problem is the popularity of the car and the ability to get it finally fixed. Now, here's another one we had. My grandson's playing baseball. One of the moms, I'm talking to her. She knows I'm into auto. And she says, I can't get my car to smog. They said something about the oxygen sensor won't run. And it's a Wrangler. It was a 2016 Wrangler. I said, well, Kelsey, I think you got a technical service bulletin on it from my experience, but let me look at it. So here's my Autel, and I see that it's 25%, 25%, 25% down the list. So these are running, but I get down to the bottom. Look at the secondary O2 completions. It's over here, 0 completions, 0%. I said, yep, you got the one with the TSB. Take it to the dealer, get it reprogrammed, and you'll be done. Well, here it is. There was the fix. She gave me a copy of the work order so I could put in my case study. And what I want to emphasize here is, notice when we started this, it was 514 bottom number, carb trips. 6 months later, it's a 752. This did not go back to 0. This did not wipe out the in-use performance tracking when it was reflashed. This information was not stored in that part of the calibration to wipe it out. So we built upon it, and you can see we've got 106 completions, and we're at 752, but in reality, we got 176 completions in a much smaller number. So I tracked it out. I wanted to see the percentage, how we were doing. And if you look down here, it says carb trips are 752 minus the 514 before the reflash. So she's driven it 238 times since the reflash, and the ratio became 45%. She's completed it 106 times. So there's where TSB fixes it. I want to know how it worked so I could show you, and you can see TSB fixed it. But why? How does it work? Did it get erased? In this case, no, it did not get erased. We just added on to it. In other cases, it could get erased. Depends on where it's stored. Okay, next vehicle. Catalyst is complete. Take a look at that. O2's not. And I'm telling you, in 99% of the cases I see, and we're going to show you the 1% to finish this up in a little bit. When I see that, I know it's going to run. Probably have a driving problem. But the 1%, we're going to show you how you deal with that. So when I see something like that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scour my mode 6. And I'm going to look for something that's out of line here. So I'm going to drag this fairly quickly. You can see this on my YouTube channel. I'm going to go through Autel here. Stay with me. Get into Autel. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling. And all of a sudden, I'm going to get down to my secondary O2 and look at my ratio of my secondary O2. It's at basically 31%. That's my blocker. And on that first page that I showed you, this link on the video, that is a link to my YouTube channel. This is an issue with Nissans. I get people all the time, I can't get the 4-cylinder Nissan to complete the O2. It's partly because the front O2s run at cruise, 55. The secondaries run part throttle, 35, 45, after it running at that speed and then decelling. So it's not a normal drive pattern, so the numbers look low. And you can watch it on the YouTube. I use the HP tuner to create it, and you can see the decels and how it runs. So if you're running any of these Nissans, go look at that video. And that video is this one. Let me go right here. This one right here is on my YouTube to show you how to run those Nissans. Okay? I'll take a look at mode 6, see what tests. I'm looking for the word delayed response for the rear, response rate for the front. That's what I'm looking for. So I took the vehicle, and I see that I've tested all my mode 6, and notice that all these tests have run and completed except this one. This one in the front. So I keep driving it, and all of a sudden, this one completes. But notice, I'm still not complete. So now I go check the rear ones. And I'm telling you right now, I want you to remember this on Nissans, because we're going to use this in the last case study. 02 is, okay, we're going to be looking for bank 1 sensor 2. That's 02 up here. So if you don't see the numbers, and I have the canned stuff on my website, bank 1 sensor 2. TID 82 is killing these Nissans right now, making it hard to run. This one was a driving problem. This one needed a deceleration like I told you. When I did it, look at what happened. There was my blocker. I had to find out what this TID was. And notice what happened to the O2. It now completed. Okay, so now let's put all this together in a common problem that's running rampant out there. And you should be very, very aware of this. For my people in California, you may not be aware of it yet because we don't smog them until 8 years out. This is a 2020 Infiniti, not just the Q60s, but the 3.5 liter engines. You name it, Muranos, Pathfinders, they're all having this issue. I have 15 case studies from around the country on this where I've helped techs. And they've shared information with me, following my instructions. And these are, I'm going to say to you, when they wind up at the dealer, most of the Nissan techs I know are good at running their monitor tests. This vehicle has been driven by 3 different techs over 900 miles. It's turned in, traded in, so they got it prepared for the smog, and the O2 is not complete. They've run all the factory tests. It works. He's taken my class. He's collecting this information. He's learning about it. He has the exact condition we just showed you. Test complete, O2 not complete. This is the 1% of the time that the O2 is not going to complete. It's a problem they have with the car, and we're hoping that CARB will do what we've asked them to do and research this. So here's what he sends me. 12 completions out of 738, 195 out of 742. No DTCs. Okay, so he's on tech line and everything. They're telling him, oh, throw O2s at it. And he's taking my classes. And I don't want to throw O2s at it. I want to be sure. So he goes in and looks for that TID 82. And it says rear O2 delayed response, so needs a decel. They're doing that. It's not running. He scours mode 6, and notice this is run, but look at TID 82. Now, if you get this on a 4-cylinder, obviously that's just one bank. If you get it on a V8, make sure you look at 0682 and see if they're both at zeros, then you're probably not driving the car correctly. If bank 2 has something in it and bank 1 doesn't, your fix is going to be a new O2 sensor on the bank 1 sensor 2. That has fixed every one of them that we've dealt with. There's something in the software that's not reporting it as failed. It's not reporting as complete. And the way we're finding this out too is I have someone associated with in Indiana, runs the emissions program, helps run the emission program there, and he's fed me a bunch of case studies based on the information I've asked him. And they're seeing those 20s right now as 6-year inspections, and they're all having incomplete O2 sensors. All 15 of the cars we've helped people with have been bank 1 sensor 2s. He could have thrown all the sensors in it, but he never would have understood what was going on. For some reason, he puts another sensor in, it fixes it, but I don't buy the sensor. I don't know what it is. I wish I had an answer for it. We've been sending all these case studies to CARB so that hopefully they're going to investigate this and see what's going on. The problem with in-use performance tracking is the longer your emission program is before you get your first inspection, the less data they have. Now, they do call bring vehicles in randomly and check them. But you're 8 years out, and you could have a vehicle with 150,000 miles on it. All this stuff has been missed. I'm letting you know that in this case, that O2 is not going to complete, even though the cat was done. All the other tests were done to test the cat, but the one to flip the flag was not running, and it was a rear one that's blocking it. Something in the software is preventing from doing, and I hope someday to do an update on this and say, hey, there's a reflash on this, but for right now, it's bank 1 sensor 2s on the V6. If it's a 4-banger, it's generally a driving condition like I showed you, and look at that YouTube video I gave you. So make a long story short, to finish this up, he basically, here's what he said. After he put in, he didn't want to do a tech line set. He didn't want to throw rear O2s at it and just O2s at it in general. He looked at all the numbers and said, I'm confident it's bank 1 sensor 2. They've been drive 900 miles. He didn't even get to the freeway, barely 2 miles, and it ran. One of the reports I got out of Indiana is this vehicle had been driven for 3,000 miles until he contacted me. He's doing this now. He's seeing these all the time, and they're fixing them. They're reporting them, sending them out to be fixed because they're inspection only. And the bottom line here was he just showed me that, one, how important this information could be. He was a dealer that had an aftermarket scanner that showed him this information, and he put it to use. He just didn't feel like throwing 2 O2s in it and walking away from it. He wanted to know that's what fixed it. Okay, so this is how you apply this. So in the use performance tracking, in summary, before we finish here, don't drive the bottom number. Only use the number to give yourself a weighted average to see what your chances are. But don't think because the ratio is out of whack that there's something necessarily wrong with the car. It could be a driving condition. There could be a TSB, and there's something is wrong with the car. So look at those things and weight it. It could be a start-stop vehicle. Look at the information I've given you, and that's why we're going to send you the link to go back and review this, and it'll be on the YouTube channel, because this is a lot of information in an hour, and I've condensed it down to get an hour. I've got other case studies I could show you. It's more information to talk about, but I don't want to overload you on this. This is good, solid information that if you respect it, and don't use the word, the bottom numbers, counters, opportunities. Forget all that crap. It's just something to give them an average to tell you what your chances are of winning the lotto. That's the best way I can explain it. Okay, and then finally, obviously you've been finding the registration for the Tech Tip Thursdays. And the last one is, if you need to get a hold of me, there's my Gmail and there's my website. If you haven't been there, it's all free. It's cookie free. It's being used by a lot of techs. The big problem with the website is adding content to it takes time, and I'm working on it. There is one page I want you to check out in there. It says new content added. It's like a TSB list. So if you've been in there, it shows you the newest things I've added to the website or the YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is not perfect. It's I don't rehearse these. It's a lot of time it's raw stuff, but it gets the point across. And I don't want to give you all the answers. I want you to read into it a little bit and understand the stuff. And if you don't understand it, feel free to reach out to me. So we're coming up on the hour. I appreciate, let me see, I don't think there's anything in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to follow up with me. For all of you in attendance today, I thank you for attending. You will get an email link from me with the video on my YouTube channel if you want to watch this again. And the other two that I showed you earlier, the tips for drive cycles, the Mode 6 and the Mode 9, are all on my YouTube channel for you to watch and use as you can, share. We want to get this information out there. Misinformation in the automotive industry can be a killer. Use Mode 6, Mode 9 as needed and understand it so you're not making excuses for it, but also do what I call read between the lines and understand what you could be missing and ask yourself some questions. Okay? Other than that, I think we're done for the day. I thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing you or having you attend future Tech Tip Thursdays with Delphi. Have a great day.